Hi everyone. So the next video in this series about applying gene and cell therapies for muscle diseases, I'm going to talk about cell therapies and just a quick jump to the bottom line. It's actually not something that I'm that optimistic are really going to be practical, at least based on what's been done so far. Okay, so the first video, I gave a little bit of a background on how muscles are formed and repaired and grow, based on stem cells. And that's kind of an important part um, of this whole story. Okay, so to review, okay, so the basic idea of, cell therapy as opposed to gene therapy, basically in gene therapy, you're either putting in a new gene to cells in a person's body, usually with, say, a virus, or you're editing to correct a mistake in the genes that are already in the cells in a person's body. Okay, cell therapies are a little bit different in that, but they can be applied in much the same way, in that you're transferring cells into the person's body that already have the correct gene. So you're putting in this case, some gene that the cells lack. So I'll kind of color code these. So we have a muscle fiber with the cell nuclei in blue, and they have a little red dot, which means that they don't have a certain gene that the muscle fiber needs to stay healthy. But there's stem cells, which in the case of muscles are called satellite cells, and they have a purple dot, which is the color code for them having the correct gene. Okay, so what happens is now if the muscle fiber dies, say because it doesn't have, a needed gene to keep it healthy, then these satellite cells can divide, and we went over that in the last video, and they will produce cells called myoblasts, which are sort of immature muscle cells. And because the muscle cells come from the satellite stem cells that have the needed gene, the myoblasts will also have the needed gene. Okay, and then in a few steps, the muscle fibers, the myoblasts form a new muscle fiber, which now has the needed gene, whereas the initial fiber that was there at the beginning didn't have one. Okay, so in theory, you fix the problem. Okay, now, but what are the issues in all of this? Okay, well, first of all, muscle fibers, even in a disease state, don't just up and die. They usually have, in a healthy muscle cell, basically lives a really long time. It's only when there's either some disease or some serious injury that causes a muscle fiber to die and have to be reformed by stem cells. Then you need to figure out how you're going to get the stem cells. Are you going to use the stem cells of, the original person that you're trying to treat? Okay, and there's a problem with that because, yeah, they're stem cells, but they also don't have the needed gene, so you're just going to be right back where you started from. Unless you take the cells out of the body and then do some some kind of genetic correction on them, which is fairly challenging. Or you can use stem cells from a healthy person, but then that's essentially a cell that doesn't belong to their own body. Their immune system is probably going to recognize it as not being from their own body and is going to try to reject it. So you either have the problems of, making it compatible with the immune system, and there's ways of doing that, like, for organ transplants or bone marrow transplants, which is really a kind of cell therapy. But that's rather involved, or with genetic correction. Now, the other thing is that if you take a person's own stem cells, genetically correct them, then there's a question of how many times they're able to divide and make enough cells for them to treat their whole body. So normally there's kind of a limited what's called expansion potential of cells. It's thought to be something on the order of 40 cell divisions. In a case where a person has a muscle disease and their muscle fibers are dying, from time to time, their stem cells are already busy forming new muscle fibers to replace what's been lost. So the expansion potential of the stem cells appears to go down. Now I'm saying appears because all of the details and all of the factors that are involved aren't completely understood. Okay, so now if you can get a good source of the proper stem cells and make enough of them to treat a whole person, okay, now you have to get them into the person's body. Okay, so gene therapy, normally, you just put it, the preferred way of doing it is to inject a virus into a person's bloodstream. And then that will be carried to all areas of their body. And, if you're good, you find a kind of virus that tends to, head to muscles to deliver the needed gene to muscle cells. Okay, but cells are bigger and, don't really move around very efficiently if you just inject them into the bloodstream. So you really have to do an intramuscular injection. So you inject it into the muscle, and then it can't move more than a few millimeters in any direction from the place where you inject it. Okay, which means that if you're treating a person's whole body, they're basically going to be a pincushion. Well, okay, that may be okay, given the fact that you have, a muscle disease that you're trying to treat. Okay, but then the other thing is that engraftment. So muscles already have their own supply of satellite cells. The muscle fiber is like, okay, I've already got my stem cells. What are these cells doing here? And so what's been observed in studies is that relatively few of the cells that you inject actually make their way to the outside of the muscle fiber and function as satellite cells. Now, there have been some animal studies that have shown promise that, we can give an animal with a muscle disease an injection of stem cells and get them to produce the protein that their muscles didn't have before. Okay, but they kind of went to great lengths to do that. In particular, what they did is to give the animals a really high dose of radiation so that their own satellite cells from their muscles weren't able to divide and replenish the muscle on their own. Then they, to make sure that they needed to produce new muscle fibers, they gave them something called cardiotoxin, which is basically from cobra venom, which kills very efficiently the muscle fibers. So, if you get a high dose of radiation and bit by a snake, um, and have your immune system suppressed, then this treatment might work for you. Well, okay, that worked in mice. It's pretty clear that you're not going to be doing that with people. So while in theory it kind of works, um, there's just a lot of reasons having to do with this that I don't really think it's the most efficient way forward for muscle diseases. Um, for other things like cells which secrete, say, insulin or produce red blood cells or something into the bloodstream, that's a different story. Cell therapy is a viable thing. I just think it's very difficult to apply to muscle diseases. So anyway, that's sort of my take on cell therapy. And so then the next couple of videos, I'm going to be talking some more about gene transfer therapy and gene editing. So thank you and hope you're doing well.